All right, we're getting close to the end of the day, but we have a very important last segment to bring to you. It's called Optimism and Opportunity, the new roadmap to success. Again, you're listening to the Big Connect presented by Comcast Business, and today presented by Connecticut, our day sponsor for the day. And now I'd like to welcome in Amy Allen, a partner with blumshapiro, and Michael LaCrosse, Director of Advisory Services Group with blumshapiro. And Amy and Michael, thank you so much for joining us today and being a part of the Big Connect.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Happy to be here.
Great. Well, let's get started, and then we can field some questions at the end, and I'll jump in and help moderate those.
All right. Bear with us as we just share our screen. Okay, can someone confirm that they can see this?
I see it coming up.
Still loading, yep. There we go.
Can you see it okay?
Yes.
All right, great. Well, thank you all for having us. My name is Mike LaCrosse. I lead our CFO advisory practice here at blumshapiro. And Amy, I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
Sure, Amy Allen, I'm a partner at blumshapiro, and I head up our HR advisory practice.
Great. So good afternoon, everyone. We're going to take you through what blumshapiro calls the roadmap to success for dealing with the crisis that we're currently in. As you can imagine, we're all in different situations here. So we're going to give you a couple of examples of how certain companies are going through the crisis and how we are recommending to many of our clients how we continue to drive through this roadmap. So there'll be 4 stages that we talk about. We've got the survival stage, which, that was really around Q1 timeframe. It was, February, March, April timeframe where, this crisis really hit us and we were trying to figure out, what does this truly mean? What is this new climate going to mean? And then we went through the pivoting stage. We went through pivoting the organization to saying, okay, what does reopening our business look like? What's this new normal going to look like? And now we're starting to actually leave the pivoting area. We're starting to look into stabilization. A lot of our clients are focused on what is the new environment going to be and how do we focus on ultimately getting to that final landing spot on the roadmap of thrive and ultimately grow and prosper. So it's important to reflect on where we've been. What we're going to focus on here is focusing on that, but also looking at the primarily 3 different areas here: the financial impact of our businesses, the people impact of our businesses, and the product and services impact of the businesses. So, Amy, I'll pass it back to you.
Sure. So the first phase of this process, or what we're calling stage 1 survival, if we all can think back to the late March, April, and May stages of the pandemic and what we were going through both personally and professionally, there were a number of different components to this survival mode. Obviously, there was a new focus on forecasting and liquidity. We were all struggling with how to get people remote, or if we needed to be at work, if we're manufacturing, distribution, retail, at that point, food services type of industry, were we going to be able to have people come back to work safely? We were thinking about layoffs and furloughs and what the heck is the difference between a layoff and a furlough. Then very quickly, within a few weeks, the CARES Act was upon us and applying for the PPP loan. All of the different stimulus opportunities were also on our mind in this phase. We also, I don't need to remind any of us about the personal crisis around toilet paper, but even as businesses, we were assessing the supply chain, both for things that we needed to, for our businesses to run internally, but also if there was a supply chain component to our industry, how was the shutdown and the survival mode going to impact the way we operated. Next slide, Mike. So let's get into a deeper dive in this stage 1. I think that the best way to describe this is most of us were operating in a state of shock or in a fog. If you think back at the very beginning, many of us thought this was going to be a short-term challenge that we were going to be maybe doing this for weeks, not months. And from a people side of the business, again, we were thinking about layoffs, furloughs. For many of our clients, there was a decision made to go through pay cuts at an executive level versus having to put lower level or entry level employees through layoffs or furloughs. But even more importantly than all of the organizational issues, getting people remote, figuring out how to work safely, working through the stimulus package, the big change in the survival mode for us from a people side of our business was learning how to manage people remotely and learning how to manage not just through the tactical, but through the emotional, having to operate with a sense of empathy, having to help people not only deal with the potential of getting sick or getting sick, but also deal with the fear, with the unknown. This was a absolute throw yourself into the lion's den stage of this pandemic when we're all operating under this state of fear and unknown and panic. Mike, do you want to jump in on the financial and the products?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the financial side, as you probably remember just a few months ago, is a lot of companies were dealing with liquidity and cash flow. How are we going to keep the doors open? From a receivables perspective, a lot of customers weren't going to pay their debt anymore. So if we have no receivables coming in, where's the cash ultimately going to come from? And then we have this new thing that no one really knew, and some still might not even know how to deal with, is the PPP loans and the CARES Act and other stimulus packages that were out there. On the products and services side, people are wondering, well, I've got some inventory now. Do I have enough? What's my new demand going to be? Will my suppliers still be around? I think I'll use a couple of restaurant examples as we go through here, but I think back to the restaurants. They were closed. They laid everyone off. They got PPP money, but they still could not even open. And then when they opened, they only were open at certain capacities. How are those businesses ultimately going to survive? So what are some of the lessons we learned, here in survival mode? I think the biggest one that from a financial perspective is cash is king. The old adage is still true. Contingency planning is needed. A lot of companies that we deal with don't do any contingency planning. And there are some companies that do, but they're looking at 10% decline or 10% increase or maybe 20%. No one was really looking at 75% or ultimately shutting their doors the next day due to regulations. And how many people or how many of you are actually doing forecasting? I'll tell you, a lot of our clients aren't actually thinking about the future. They're really focused on the past. And then on the products and services side, what if the supply chain dries up? What if I can't get the product? Inventory is a significant portion of that cash flow as well. So even if I can get that product, maybe I don't have enough cash flow for the future. And then how do we pivot? Think about, again, the restaurant example. Should we be eating outside? Should we be doing DoorDash, Uber Eats, whatever it may be? Or should we think about SKU rationalization? Should we be producing certain widgets and servicing certain clients? Amy, you want to take the people side?
Sure. Just to repeat what we've already gone over in the survival mode, some of the lessons learned, I think, are really going to contribute to how we continue to manage through the pandemic. Figuring out how to react to a national crisis in a way that kept our businesses going, get people remote with equipment and support, think about how to understand the impact on productivity, understand the impact of the budget, and pivot, which is a word that you're going to hear Mike and I say a lot in this session. Really, this idea of commercial real estate, I think, is an ongoing question for the future. But even in survival phase, a lot of our clients were thinking about what is the space that we need going forward, seeing as we've learned how to work remotely, or we've learned how to work with the critical essential workforce that we need to be productive. So some of these critical lessons, learning how to be reactive to get people remote, to figure out how to manage the stimulus package. I think these reaction lessons will serve us well as the pandemic continues.
Yeah, so at the time of putting this deck together, obviously we're more into that stage one, and we're recommending to our clients, go out and get that PPP loan. Make sure you understand your liquidity. Make sure you're doing cash flow forecasting. make sure you've got a contingency plan. You know, Amy mentioned the other side of the contingency plan was on the toilet paper side. Well, what if demand goes through the roof? Well, the food industry, you know, demand is going through the roof. How do you actually have a contingency plan to produce more product and service more clients? For businesses that are being challenged, are you doing stress testing? Are you looking at business interruption claims? All these are different actions that we're recommending to our clients to ultimately look into as they're going through that first stage. Amy, on the people side?
Yeah, the action items to take away from this phase one going into phase two is how are we managing our overall HR administration, including benefits and compensation? Are we able to hire and separate from people from their employment remotely or in a more reduced way? How are we managing remote workers? And what are our staffing strategies in the future? We had many clients that as of February were looking to hire new office managers or receptionists that had to rethink during the survival mode about that staffing strategy, and were they going to need receptionists in the future, or did they want to take that open position and think more strategically about what was going to be the future need of the business, not necessarily sitting at the front desk. So these kinds of questions and thought processes were going through the heads of our clients. The other interesting thing for us as a firm, you know, we were going through all of these questions and these action items, both internally while also trying to help our clients manage through them externally, so we can speak to it both on a personal level for ourselves as a professional services firm, as well as what our clients were going through back in the very beginning of COVID. So let's talk about stage two. As Mike said, you know, when we first put this deck together, we were sort of just starting in phase two. This stage two, this pivoting stage, I think has lasted a lot longer than any of us expected. And this is the time, sort of going back to June, where we started to think about reopening. We started to think about what that might look like and how things had changed even in the first 3 months of the pandemic. Looking at strategic planning and looking how to pivot or be agile, be able to continue to react in some of the unknowns. I think that some important examples is to think about open positions or future open positions, and are they truly what you need for your business? If we get into a little deeper dive, these were some of the strategies that our clients were thinking about. Some of our most successful clients who've come through this in a strong way did what I think is a really important thing for everyone to consider. They put together return to work task force or return to work teams that included assigning a COVID czar. Not sure I would ever want that title, but a lot of our clients have assigned someone as the decision maker when it comes to some of these bullets. So in this return to work stage two, this pivoting, we needed to make decisions on facilities and safety. If we were going to bring people back even in a small way, we had to think about how are we going to have hand sanitizer? How are we going to make sure that there are masks available? Are we going to put arrows on the hallway so that people were going one way? How are we going to call people back from furloughs or from layoffs? This is a really tricky one and can be tricky because of the risk of discrimination. And you want to make sure that when you're calling people back, that you're really thoughtful about the who, the why, and the when. We had many employees that we wanted to call back and couldn't come back because of daycare issues or caring for people who were ill. So this was a big component to our early return to work thinking. What are we going to do about employees that show symptoms or get sick? What if when they show symptoms or get sick when they're at work? Majority of our clients, and I'm sure many of you, have used the self-certification process where you certify that you're not feeling sick and don't have certain symptoms, and you're tracking that either manually or through some sort of electronic system. Also can't stress enough about the detailed communication plan, and this continues even to where we are today in November. As you all know, no communication is ever too much communication. I've had a number of clients where some of the executives were uncomfortable with the unknown and had to delegate the communication piece to ensure that communication was going out all the time, even if there was something wasn't known or the news was bad. It was really important to over communicate to employees during the June through current times. We had all kinds of new compliance issues, new CARES Act posters that needed to be put up, trainings if people were returning to work when it comes to COVID safety, social distancing, wearing a mask, et cetera. And these last three bullets I really want to stress as a part of this stage 2, because we're still in this today. We have noticed that there's been higher turnover in most of the industries that we're supporting than ever before, whether employees were laid off, whether employees were dissatisfied with the way their employer handled the beginnings of the pandemic, or that there are just more opportunities out there. Understanding where you fall from a compensation standpoint against the market, making sure that you're looking at your policy, especially your policy regarding return to work, remote work. We have one particular client that we're trying to hire a mid-level manager position for them. The position has to be in the office 5 days a week. There's no remote work. And we've had 8 out of 10 candidates that we approach not want to interview because there's no remote work opportunity. So this concept of remote work, which earlier in this year, January and February, was considered a perk, is now considered a necessity. And most candidates going forward are going to expect that employers will be able to provide a remote work opportunity for those positions that aren't obviously in a manufacturing or distribution environment. And then also looking at your benefits from a competitive basis, competitive to market. Are there benefits around people's well-being that you might want to consider in light of the pandemic to evolve and adjust to what we've learned since the pandemic? So all of these things are a part of the task force. In those clients that we mentioned have started these task force. The task force is also asking questions like, what are our customers needing? How have they changed? What are our employees needing? How have they changed? What do we want to continue doing that we had to do during lockdown? What do we want to stop doing? We've all heard the phrase Zoom fatigue. We already have clients that have said we're going to cut back on the Zoom meetings. So all of those kinds of questions need to be asked consistently, the answers need to be tracked, and the action needs to be taken. Want to go to the next slide, Mike?
Sure. So I think what Amy said was very important, and also applies to the finance and operations side of the house too, is that czar that Amy mentioned. Well, focusing on understanding the demand for your products is going to drive a lot of the conversations in that business, and putting together that forecast is going to be key to understanding the future of this business. So we've been focusing on a lot of that with our clients in the last few months. We've also been focused on how do we relook at our business? How are we going to examine our business and assess our business to say, should we be doing this or should we be doing that? We're also looking at how to transform the business and change it to be something that's going to survive and ultimately prosper in this new market. Again, think back to the restaurants, for example. I don't know if you've been lately, but a lot of the restaurants that I've been to, the menu has changed. Well, why has the menu changed? Are they looking at the profitability of the products that they're serving? Do they have supply chain issues? Maybe they can't get beef or chicken or another product. Maybe their chef left. All these are items that Amy talked about, that we're talking about, but they apply to the business that you're thinking about. Think about exactly what I just mentioned is the profitability of the product. Think about the people who can produce the product, as in the chef in this example. And then ultimately make sure that we understand, can you actually still get that product from your customers? I think if there's one thing that I would take as a takeaway on this slide is being extremely fluid and agile is absolutely key in this new environment. So what are some of the actions that you should take during this pivoting timeframe? And I already mentioned some of it, but it's assessing the organization, making sure that you understand where there are gaps and how you can actually fill those gaps, how you can make some improvements and drive efficiency. Think about strategic planning. This drives a lot of different various scenarios that you could do from strategic planning. Again, think about the contingency plan. It's very similar. If the business goes up 10%, up 20%, maybe up 100%. Now, where are you going to be able to get, say, your products and services out the door? Can you get them out the door at 100%? All those things are going to change for you very dramatically based on how quickly your business grows. And then other areas that we've been talking to our clients about is around outsourcing, whether it's finance and accounting services, or maybe it's controllers and CFOs of cutting back on spend there. If your business has declined, maybe there's an area to cut back, and there's some ultimate areas of cost savings that could be had. Amy, you want to take the people side?
Sure. Just to summarize what we've already talked about, action items in this stage were determine a back to work plan. If you can put together a task force or a team with a top decision maker, that's been a really successful strategy for us and for our clients. Identifying top talent is something we haven't talked about in this competitive market, realizing who are those individuals that if they were to leave would be really damaging to the organization. There's a couple of different strategies to identify top talent, but having open conversations and developing strategies around how to retain those individuals is a critical action during this phase. We talked about doing an analysis on your competitiveness from a comp and benefits perspective, making sure that you've reviewed handbook policies, that you're thinking about positions that you have open. How are you going to attract new talent? Do we have the right organizational structure, the right people reporting to the right people? And this is also a time where you could consider doing an HR health assessment. Even if you're an organization that doesn't have HR or does have HR, taking this time to think about what are all of the functions that we have under that HR umbrella and how efficiently are they working? Should this be a time for us to think about that HR health assessment? So going into stage 3. So this is still sort of a crystal ball approach for us, because I think we're still sort of moving from stage 2 to stage 3. There's a number of different triggers, I think, that will, drive business in one direction or the other. Obviously, the return to school has been sporadic throughout the different states in the country. Returning to school and how that's managed in your location or your business is obviously impactful on who can and can't come back to work. Obviously, the election is a big trigger in terms of how stimulus packages are going to look like going forward, what the approach to COVID is overall, and people's emotions and the divisions that we've seen as a result of the election. And then, of course, there's the whole big question of the vaccine. So top 4 news items, right, every night are the triggers that are going to help us figure out what stage 3 looks like from a business perspective. That's the virus itself, its numbers, whether school can open, the election, and the vaccine. These are things that are really going to trigger what this looks like. But in stage 3, these are times for us to look at market conditions. What's changed in terms of how you're running your business? Are there products or services that we should stop doing? How profitable are our products and services? Again, things that maybe we should think about evolving or doubling down on. If we're going to stop doing one thing, does that mean we can double down on another thing? And then from a staffing consideration, this is a time, again, to talk to your employees about how they're doing, whether it's surveying them, asking questions, making sure that you've brought back the right people, and that you're having the organizational structure that's supportive of your product and growth strategies. So I'll talk about the people here, Mike, and then turn it over to you and the other two. But as I mentioned in the previous slide, surveying employees to assess their comfort level is really important. This can be as easy as just using a 4-question or 5-question Survey Monkey. The important thing is, if you're going to ask the questions, make sure that you listen and you respond, letting people know that you heard them. Even if some of the suggestions are not realistic, it's really important that if you're going to survey employees, and you should, that you respond, thanking them to participate, and explaining that they were listened to and whatever actions are going to be taken as a part of that survey. We talked about assessing the HR function. to include, how do we have different process improvements we need to make because of the new work environment. We're going to look at technology and compliance in a different way. Really important to invest in leadership training, especially for those organizations that now have a mostly remote workforce. Leading others in a remote world is very different than being able to see people face to face. How we delegate, how we deal with conflict, how we're coaching people, how we're setting expectations, all of this is very different, and investing in leadership training is an important part of retention and the employee experience. And again, can't stress it enough, over communicate to your employees, even if the news is bad.
Yeah, from the financial and operations side of the house, I think the key thing to think about here is we've done the analysis in that stage 2. Now we're in stage 3. It's about execution. So you're looking into new business models. Well, is it making sanitizer? Is it eating outside? Is it new delivery models? It's about going and executing those models now. And it's looking at what is the marketing conditions. Well, you're forecasting your new demand for your products, but are you ultimately working closely with your customers? And are you ultimately working very closely with suppliers to make sure that you can get that product so you can put together a real clean forecast, a strong forecast? And then understand the profitability of products and services. We mentioned this a couple of times, but once you understand that, does it make sense to stop producing certain products? Does it make sense to start producing more profitable products? And again, that's got to align very closely with the demand and the forecast that you're putting together. So some of the actions to take here, we've mentioned this before, but do a profitability assessment. Understand the true profitability, not just the gross margin, not just the material margin, but the true profitability of your business through all the different SKUs and products and services that you provide. Other folks are going to want to look at the business valuation. What has COVID done? We've actually been working with a couple of clients that were, teetering on the edge of, should I sell my business? Should I keep my business? And, once COVID hit, things change, and maybe the valuation of their business changed. Maybe that changed their mind. But also looking at the economic condition in the market assessment. Just like Amy mentioned, you've got potential vaccine coming, you've got a new president potentially coming. All these things are going to impact the economy, and what does that truly mean to your business, and making sure that you fully understand that so you can use that to focus on the future.
On the people side, we talked about in stage 2 doing analysis around comp and benefits. This is the stage to make some comp and benefits decisions if you're going to make any changes. This is the time to, if you've made decisions around changing organizational structures or people's roles, to ensure that we have those job descriptions and those org charts at the ready. We talked about training and development, and we talked about the HR health review, all a key part of this stage 3.
So going into stage 4, I think this is where we all hope to get here sooner rather than later. Focus on thriving and growing and ultimately evolving. What are going to be how are you going to take your business to the next level and continue to succeed? Well, hopefully you've done a lot of the things that we've already talked about, but now it's going to be about continuing that and focusing on profitable growth and generation of cash. It's going to be focused on setting up new procedures to ultimately operate the business in this new environment. Maybe it's new technology. Ultimately, how do you drive a more efficient process for the future? So, I think the key thing here when we think about this stage is that you're focusing on evolving and growing, but we also got to keep in mind that, every 10 years or so, something big happens. Is that going to be another pandemic? Is it going to be a natural disaster? Is it going to be a war? Is it going to be a financial crisis? If you think about in history, you could see each of the 10 to 20 year cycles of business, and it ultimately hits it. And you got to make sure that you're on top of all these things. So when you're thinking about evolving, making sure that you're focusing on that profitable growth and ultimately the generation of cash, that's going to keep your liquidity very strong and help you be able to survive these things. And then thinking about the contingency plan for all scenarios. I've mentioned this a couple of times. Make sure your business understands the upside of 10%, 20%, maybe it's 50 or 100% in the toilet paper example, in the food example. but what if this next crisis that comes up impacts you, where you need to get more product out the door quicker than ever before? But also, think about the technology. Technology is really key here. A lot of our clients are now noticing that their technology is, 10 years old, 5 to 10 years old, and they could be doing things a lot quicker, a lot cleaner, could be having less people in their organization, and could be a lot more efficient. So there's a lot of technology out there that could ultimately help you do that. And then looking at your inventory. What I've found in our clients is that inventory, they used to think of it as inventory is all about driving sales. Well, it obviously does, but if you have too much inventory, that's going to eat up your cash, and that's going to be a major challenge for you. But then also assess your manufacturing needs. Now that you've pivoted, maybe you're producing different products, maybe you need different equipment, that's going to have a cash crunch. Maybe you need more space, maybe you need less space. Lots of things to be thinking about here from the operations side.
And from the people side, we talked about this, thinking about remote work as more of a long-term new way of working versus a short-term reaction to the pandemic. With that, and whether it's remote work or it's just working differently because we have to be in a safer environment with, talking to each other through masks, trying to read body language without being able to see whether people are smiling or frowning, means a new requirement for leadership, new expectations for how to manage people in light of what we've been through with COVID. We're going to also have to evolve our policies and make sure that we're continuing compliant. It's not even just COVID policies. For Connecticut, we've got the paid family medical leave, which is going to be starting in full force over the next 18 months. So it's not just COVID, but other compliance issues related to policies are going to have to be something that we evolve through. We're going to have to continue to solidify our culture. What are our core values? What are the core values that help us make decisions and are what frames our employee experience? Because that employee experience is going to, as it has been for decades, be the cornerstone for why people stay or go.
So on actions to take or consider once you get into this area, we talked about technology improvement. Make sure you're starting to think about what technology can ultimately help you. Is there a software technology selection process and an implementation process that you may want to go through to help you become more efficient in your business? And then on the business side and strategic planning side, think about those strategies. Think about the contingency plans. Make sure that you've got a plan. Make sure you get thinking about forward thinking. A lot of our clients, again, just really aren't thinking towards the future. I think if there's one thing I would say is a key takeaway is that status quo really isn't the same anymore. It's gone. It's really focusing on being agile and moving towards more efficiency is the new norm these days.
And again, continued HR assessment on the people side. Do you have the right people and systems and processes to support a very fluid and efficient HR function? Are there pieces of HR, you could say this of any part of your business, whether it's finance, HR, technology, are there components of that process that would make sense to outsource? And then thinking about talent acquisition, how are we making sure that we're still keeping our eyes out for top talent and being able to attract and recruit those critical people for our future?
Okay, well, thank you all for your time. If we have a few minutes, we're happy to open up to questions. Garrett, if we still have time.
Great, thanks, Mike and Amy. Very good discussion and some really critical topics for people to cover. And as Mike said, we could take a couple questions right now. You can put those in the chat if you have them, or the Q&A. Here's one: is it better to get a line of credit or loan? When do you not need it?
So what I'm doing for a couple of clients right now is actually helping them get those lines of credit established, because the process takes a while. There is a cost to it, as most understand. So if you can bear that cost and have it as a extra insurance policy, I typically recommend people are getting them. But remember, it does take time. I mean, it's not like walking into the bank and you get one overnight. It does take time to do that, and I think that's what's going to be key for you, is making sure that you've allocated the right amount of time to get that, but it's also having that insurance policy for yourself.
And any thoughts, if there is another round of stimulus that comes out of the federal government, how should businesses prepare right now? I know when that first came out in the spring this year, there was a big rush, lots of concerns that you didn't have your paperwork right or your documentation correct. Anything that businesses should do right now?
It's really tough to say because we don't know what those stimulus packages are going to be. I think what we've learned very quickly is that our clients need a lot of help here. There's no crystal ball that says this is what the government's going to be requiring. There's no crystal ball that says this is what they're ultimately going to do when they audit you from a PPP perspective. I think long story short is make sure you have someone on your team that you can partner with a consultant or an outside firm to help you through this. Your banks are probably not going to be as much help as you really think. You're really going to probably need outside help. And, I think there's companies out there like ours that actually don't cost a lot to ultimately help you and review this stuff, but it's going to be able to help you have a peace of mind that you're getting everything done correctly. This is not, no one's ever done this. And so if you think about who's going to know the most, it's those folks that are doing it more often than not. So, if you're running a business, you may do it once, or maybe you have a couple of businesses that you're on the board on, like I am. But we have a group of folks that are doing hundreds, if not thousands of these, and those folks will know the answers to all your questions.
Great. Well, Mike and Amy, thank you so much. Thank you to Bloom Shapiro. I should mention the Chamber is a client, and we do our financial back office all through Bloom Shapiro. So we appreciate the support, appreciate you putting on this presentation today.
Thanks for having us. Have a great day, everybody, and a great week.
Great, thanks. Well, we have reached the end of the Big Connect for today, but as you know, it continues on for 3 days. We'll be continuing to do the programming. We'll start again tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. Great lineup of speakers. Once again, tomorrow morning, you'll be hearing from Toby Corey with Get Virtual. He'll be talking all about ways that you can bring your business into the digital age. We'll have our equity and inclusion through Authentic Means panel, sponsored by the HR Source. Toby, by the way, will be brought to you by Southern Connecticut State University and Comcast Business. And then our Women's Power panel, brought to you by Key for Women and Key Bank. And then finally, how to create a business plan and adapting your business strategy. That will be with the Connecticut SBDC, Apex, and Red Rock Branding. So a lot of great programming, 2 additional days coming up as well. This has been a great first day for the Big Connect presented by Comcast Business. We hope you utilize all of the tools that are on Whova, visit the virtual booths, go to the online networking. We'll have that open again for you tomorrow. Thank you to Connecticut for sponsoring today's programming. Have a great day, everyone.